Hi there. Welcome. I'm Henry Chinsky. My family and friends call me Chick. And I'm here tonight to present to you some common sense wealth building strategies, even though I have retirement up here. They're wealth building strategies in general. And we're going to talk about these common sense strategies that really aren't so common. But before I get started, I want to just quickly note for you millennials and X-Geners that might be watching this webinar that what you need to do is find somebody that's about 60 years old or older and ask them the question, how long did it take you to get here? And I think without exception you're going to hear it was the blink of an eye or the snap of a finger. Nobody can believe how fast you get to this age. So it's extremely important that you pay attention to these wealth building strategies and put yourself on that road to success. So what we're going to do here is look at those concepts and the strategies, and at the end I'm going to show you some cases that may fit the different demographics, and I'm sure some of you will be able to relate to. So with that, let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. And the agenda tonight is we're going to invest for a secure retirement that you can't outlive. And we're going to look at ways to fund this strategy. And we're going to look at some case studies. So when we often ask folks, if you know to be true what turned out not to be true, when would you want to know? Well, most would say, no, I want to know right now, especially about managing your money. So tonight I'm going to walk you through some of the most common misunderstandings, the myths, about how you manage the largest assets you have and how to build a retirement income that you can't outlive. You know, statistics can be fun, but can also be very important. So what I did was I gathered some information from the National Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what I found is that out of 100 people born by age 65, 1/3, that's 29 out of 100, had passed away, and that leaves 71 still alive. Of the 71 still alive, 52 are dependent on the government, or they're doing without, or they're homeless. 14 are still working and always will be, and 3 are financially independent. They don't need support from anyone, and their wealth continues to grow as they get a nice income from their assets that they've acquired. 2 are wealthy, and that is folks with a net worth of $5 million or more. Now, that was interesting to me as I looked at that. So that was a total of 5 successful people out of 100 divided by the 71 that are still living. So that gives us 7%. So only 7% are financially successful. That means that the mainstream of America, 93%, are not financially successful at all. Now, if the majority were doing everything right, then wouldn't the majority be rich? Question is, where do you see yourself right now? If you see yourself in the 93 percentile, do you really want to stay there or be one of the 7%? I'm going to show you some concepts and ideas that can get you into that 7 percentile. Now, my goal, my mission, is I'm dedicated to helping you increase your net worth, if you want to, through the application of cutting-edge financial strategies. When I say cutting-edge strategies, does that fit into the 93% or the 7%? Well, it fits into the 7%. So because these are cutting edge, it's not what everybody else is doing. And I'm going to help you discover where hidden wealth is being lost unintentionally and creatively redirect this wealth to enhance your estate, improve your lifestyle, and provide, more importantly, a comfortable, rewarding retirement. Everybody up for that? So we're going to explore a couple of what we call wealth transfers here. Now, you may be thinking, and rightly so, what makes this guy such an expert? Well, my story. For a little over 20 years, I was the benefit administrator for a Fortune 5 company. I took care of health benefits, life insurance, sick leave benefits, layoff benefits, pensions, and some other added value benefits for about 5,000 employees and another 5,000 retirees. And also, on a personal note, I became a saver and found that saving can become a habit. I was putting as much as 25% of income, sometimes more, of my income away in a mix of qualified accounts, 401ks, savings. And along the way, I'd take a few thousand here, a few thousand there to invest in the market based on the advice of advisors who were supposed to be the best in the area, only to watch the funds dwindle in very short order. But even still, had a nice cash reserve in the savings. I could write a check for most of what the family and I needed or wanted. And I thought I understood what finances were all about. I never really thought about the fact that although I had plenty of money in my savings, that making 1% and inflation being 2 or 3, I was taking one step forward and 2 steps back. Even still, having some money in savings is not a bad thing for emergencies or short-term needs. But anyway, then in early 2008, reading the Wall Street Journal, the experts were saying that my company's stock was a buy. So I moved a large portion of my 401k into the company stock. I took an early retirement in August, only to have the company forced into bankruptcy in early October before I could move the money, which I lost most of. Now, since my retirement, I've been working my own insurance practice, doing health, life, and Medicare insurance for seniors, almost by accident because I was always getting calls from folks I took care of at work wanting advice. Now, hindsight is 20/20. I've done some things right and some not so much. But since my experience has made me adverse to risk, so I've been on a journey. I have spent the last 8 years learning how money works. So 3 important reasons for me to share this information are experience, hindsight, and training. And believe me, I've trained with some of the best financial minds in the country to find out a way never to risk my principal, have growth, beat inflation. And on my journey, I found that most of the financial experts truly don't know how the real wealth is accumulated. But I'll leave that topic for another conversation. Now, the information and concepts I'll be sharing are based on the basic principle, my basic belief, is that before you put any of your hard-earned money at risk, you need to first build a solid, stable foundation with no risk. Now, if you like to gamble, this may not be the call for you. But once you build your solid financial foundation, you might then want to dabble in the market with money you can afford to lose, kind of like taking a couple hundred and going to the casino for entertainment. But personally, that even gives me the heebie-jeebies. So let's look at your investment options. And let's run these through a filter. I listed here are 16 different investments that you could put money in. We're going to filter using the filters of liquidity use and control, and then a safety filter and a rate of return filter. So let's go ahead and run through these filters. So if I'm going to put money in a side fund and I want to have access to that money, these are vehicles I can't use. You can't use a business venture or a partnership. You can't use raw land, investment real estate, or the equity in a property. They don't meet the liquidity use and control criteria. Now, if we look at safety from a safety standpoint, if we take the principal payment and put it in these vehicles, the market is going to affect the value of the principal. Well, commodities certainly will. Speculative stocks surely will. Low-quality bonds and blue-chip stocks will. Mutual funds will also. So they are all subject to market change. So if the market goes up, it can go down, putting principal at risk of loss. So we can eliminate those from a safety standpoint. The last one is rate of return. We have to look at it if we can create a positive arbitrage between what we're borrowing and what we are compounding. So we know the money market account and the U.S. Treasury bills are not creating enough rate of return to create a positive arbitrage. So that leaves us three assets that we can use: bank CDs, indexed universal life, which is an insurance product, and annuities, also an insurance product. Now, these three have some of the stabilities and guarantees that we actually are looking for. So let's look at these products for a moment and test them for conservative long-term accumulation. CDs, we know that they are certificates of deposit sold by the banks. And one of the things about CDs is they are taxed as earned. Historically, this puts its yield at somewhere around 2.5%. They're fair for managing separation of equity and real estate, but not preferred. But it's an option you could use. The second option is an annuity. This is an insurance product. And if you look at the historical rate of return, it's somewhere between 3 and 8%. And they are really made for income distribution and really not made for accumulation and compounding. They do a somewhat fair job of it, but designed for a structured payout. And they're also subject to taxation. LIFO, last in, first out. So if I have $100,000 in the annuity and it grows to $150,000, the $50,000 is the first money to come out and subject to the taxes and penalties if you're under 59 and a half years old. So there are some challenges with the annuity. The next product I want to talk about is the Indexed Universal Life, a life insurance product created by the insurance industry for tax-favored accumulation. I love this product for building wealth, a retirement income that you can't outlive, and it's great for home equity management. It has some of the great provisions. Taxation is FIFO, first in, first out. Means that if you put $100,000 in and it grows to $150,000, when you take distributions for whatever reason, the $100,000 will be the first out. The beautiful thing about the IUL is even the gains can come out tax-free. Now, the historical rate of return has been somewhere between 5 and 10%. On average, it's a 7% rate of return. And that's why I'm going to be using 7% throughout this presentation. Whoops. Now, when I say life insurance, you think, really? You're skeptical? Well, I know you are, because I was too. However, what I discovered, the life insurance I'm talking about isn't the kind our parents or grandparents had, where they paid premiums and then they never thought about it or never used it until the family received the death benefit after they passed. What I'm talking about is something completely different and way better, but often misunderstood. I'm talking about a very powerful form of life insurance, the Indexed Universal Life contract, IUL for short. It's a type of permanent insurance that enables you to grow and protect your money while securing predictable, potentially tax-free retirement income. And here's the best part. That money can be available to you anytime, anywhere, for any reason. Now, do you know anything else that can do that? Because if you do, please let me know. And when I say tax-free, here's what I mean. No federal income tax, no state income tax, no interest income tax, no capital gains tax, no means testing for Social Security, and no means testing for your Medicare benefits. How does that make you feel? Good, excited, unbelievable, confused? How can it be? Well, let me explain this product and how it works and how you can use it to create wealth. What the big deal is with Indexed Universal Life is, first of all, this is not, like I said, insurance like your parents or grandparents had. These products have only been around about 20, 25 years. And the goals that the insurance company had, and by the way, they got it right, they wanted to link the gains in the equity index, like the Standard & Poor's, the Dow, or the Russell, and they wanted to guarantee the principal inside the contract was protected from loss. And the way they did that was they created some powerful safety provisions. One of those is what's called the cap and the floor. Now, the floor means your account balance can never drop because of a stock market loss. It's your safety net, and it is part of your IUL contract. The cap is the highest percentage your account can be credited. So Index Universal Life has by contract a cap and a floor, and here's how that works. Say the floor is 0 and the cap is set at 13. Some can be different. The cap could be 15, it could be 12, and that's the moving part from company to company. But at the end of the crediting year, the S&P index sustains a negative return. Your cash doesn't receive any interest credit, but you don't lose any money due to the stock market loss. So this downside protection feature applies to your cash value, plus any gains that have already been credited in previous years. But if the index gains 20%, the insurance company is using a 13% cap. Your linked earnings will be capped at 13%. So if the index gains between 0 and 13, your cash will be credited the amount of the index gain. So if it's 8%, you get 8. If it's 10, you get 10. If it's 12, you get 12. If it's 14, you get 13. Now, this is an important thing here. Historically now, 95% of the market gains over the years have been captured using this strategy. So working between these parameters was fine with me because I was more concerned about not losing money than trying to squeeze every single dollar of gains from the stock market. Now, another one of the provisions, and there are 3 that make this a very powerful, is the caps and floors I showed you, the 0-13, and the lock-in and reset. I'm going to talk about lock-in first and how locking in of annual gains works. If I had $100,000 of cash value in an IUL contract and the index went up 10%, my cash would be credited $10,000. Now that $10,000 would be added to my principal, and I would have a new account value of $110,000, never to be given back. It becomes part of my principal. Now, if the index went down 10% in an equity account, stock market, 401ks, whatever, if it lost 10%, we would end up with less than we started with, and we would be at 99,000, and we would be underwater. So by sustaining what was earned, even a modest 5% return the next year grows the cash very nicely to 115.6. But just losing the 10% in 1 year credited an 11% or $11,500 difference in the cumulative value of this account. So that's a difference of $115,006 to $103,900. So let me continue to share with you why avoiding the market losses are so beneficial in creating wealth. In our previous lock-in example, our $100,000 experienced a 10% gain, a 10% loss, and a 5% gain, and ended up at $103,900. This is the money that would have been in the stock market, mutual funds, 401ks. When the market tanked in 2008 by 37%, the $103,900 diminished to $65,004. So by 2009, or actually 2010, when the market ran up 26.4, but our account value isn't anywhere near back to where we started. And notice that the index has not fully recovered. This is how the market works. Now, if your money had been in an Index Universal Life contract in 2008, your cash value would have been protected because of the zero floor feature. This is another strong feature of an Index Universal Life contract that protects your gains and helps your cash continue to grow. It's called a reset. It resets the equity index value on the IUL contract anniversary. In this example, the S&P dropped from 1447 to 902. But notice the IUL didn't lose any money. The year after it dropped, the index universal life contract would start with a new index of 902, not 1447. It would count any gain the next year from this new lower reset value. In this case, the market increased by 26.4%, and the index universal life contract is capped at 13, so you only got 13 of the 26. But notice the cash value is earning 13% on 115.6, not 65. So the amount the equity account had to work with in that same year. Now notice the IUL is now 130,000. It's also important to note that the index has still not got back to its 2008 starting value. Yet the cash value in the IUL contract has grown by an additional $15,000. Now we've already lived through this, and this is exactly what happened to those in the market. Folks with their funds in an IUL didn't lose a penny. This is going to happen again, and this is why I am here today sharing this information with you. Now, the market usually resets once or twice every year, small corrections, but once every 6 to 8 years, it has usually major corrections. So let's compare the cap of 13% and a floor of 0 to an equity account. You can see the last two columns are the IUL bucket, and these two columns are the returns and the amount of cash in your equity market, the stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and so on. We can see how the floor feature works right away from 2000 to 2002, when the market went down 3 years in a row on the 100,000 initial deposit. The equity account lost money in year one with a 0% floor. The index-linked account value stayed at 100,000. So you can see here, we didn't lose any money. It wasn't credited anything. The stock market went down, is losing money. You can see it didn't lose any money. So in year 2003, when the market rebounded, the equity account credited 28.6%. It had a cash value of 88,000. And the cap and the floor column, however, because it didn't lose any money in the down markets, enjoyed a 13% gain. So the difference in the cash value in year 4 on these two accounts, 97,900 in the equity account versus 123,000 with the cap and the floor strategy. So the floor feature allowed the limited cap feature to still take advantage of the market upside potential without participating in the downside, without risking your money actually being invested in the market. Now, over the past 15 years, using the 0 floor and the 13% cap strategy, it fared very well against the open market gains and losses. In this example, $64,000 better. Now, note the rate of return down here. This is something that I didn't mention yet. The indexed product, the IUL, credited 6.89%. The S&P credited 5%. Now, dividends have been added into this already, in case anybody's wondering. But what hasn't been factored in here is taxes. So this rate of return on the equity account is actually probably closer to 3.5, somewhere down in that number. So really, to be fair though, there will be periods of time where the stock market will post substantial gains with only the cap amount being credited to the cap and the floor strategy. In those instances, some will argue against the IUL contract, and this argument will seem reasonable until we experience the next big market loss. So which one is better? Well, that depends on how much risk you're willing to take. But will you be willing to take that risk during retirement which one would you rather have? And I want to remind you, like I said a couple minutes ago, that 95% of the market gains have been captured using the floor and cap strategy. So let's talk about some things that you know and some things that you might not know. You know what these are. Some of you say, oh, 401ks, the 412s, 529s. You say that's my retirement, that's my savings account, or it's my college fund. Well, they are all those things. But what they really are is these are IRS tax codes that regulate these funds. 7702, 72E, DEFRA, TAMRA. Do you know what these are? You should, but you probably don't. Most people wouldn't because they don't study how life insurance works. But they are also IRS tax codes that regulate the cash accumulation and distribution of life insurance policies. And actually, these are more powerful than the qualified plan codes you saw in the previous slide. So let me explain quickly what 7702 and 72E are and what does tax advantage mean. It means not only does the growth in the contract grow tax-free, but the distribution is tax-free, and the beauty and magic of an indexed UL product is it is a unique vehicle that allows tax-free account value accumulation, allows you to access your money tax-free, and when you die blossoms in value and transfers tax-free. I want to explain to you how important and how powerful tax-free growth is. I love the quote that Einstein made. It's about compounding interest. The most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. This is true. This is how the difference between how banks manage their money and how consumers manage their money. So let's look at that. If we take a look at $1, and if we double it over 20 periods, it could be 20 days, 20 weeks, 20 months, or 20 years, doesn't matter. Over that 20 periods, that dollar will grow to $1,048,000. That's compound. This is the power of compounding, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if we took that same dollar, but we're going to tax it at a 28% rate, at a 28% bracket, now we're going to double it and tax it over the same 20 periods. Now, instead of $1,048,000, we have $57,600. So the difference between taxable and non-taxable compounding interest is tremendous. Almost $1 million difference. One being taxed at 28% and one being taxed, not being taxed. Now, there are multiple ways to fund an indexed universal life contract, cash being the simplest. And many times we look at our clients' income and expenses and look at the discretionary income that they might have. And they usually take some percentage of that and redirect to an IUL policy. Really, most of the time without affecting lifestyle. And they either do it on a monthly or annual basis. Or they've possibly had a windfall of some sort, an inheritance or sale of a business or a property. Now, here's the deal. Across the nation, most American families acquire two large assets, made up of the house they live in and their retirement accounts that they're funding. These are not only the two largest assets you own, but they are also likely the mismanaged. So I'm going to spend a little time explaining how this asset is mismanaged and how to use it to build wealth. So let's look at your mortgage as a source for building wealth and a secure retirement. If you had enough money to pay off your mortgage right now, would you? Well, I would bet that 93% of you would write a check to pay your house off. So for generations and generations, the American dream is to own your home outright. Now, think about what your parents and your grandparents taught us. Get a good education, find a good job, buy a house, pay it off as soon as you possibly can. And that sounds good, but let's look at how that generation lived. Excuse me. My parents and grandparents lived in the same house and died in the same house. They had the same job their whole life and retired with a pension and a gold watch. They saved a little money over a long time. They had no credit card debt. In fact, my parents and grandparents thought debt was evil. And for them, a 30-year mortgage was ideal. Now think about how we live today. We change jobs 5 to 7 times. We move multiple times. Most of us will never get a pension, and we'll end up having to buy our own gold watch. And most of us are going to have to supply our own pension. Most haven't saved any money or very little money at all. Have a lot of credit card debt, especially the millennials and X-Geners. Statistics show that those folks are living off credit cards. We refinance more frequently, often to consolidate the debt that we've created. The average life of a mortgage is 5 years. So, if we're doing all these things different from the advice of our parents and grandparents, we need to consider doing something different if we want to change that trend. So, let's look at how a traditional mortgage works and how you manage that mortgage. Principal and interest make up the payment. Interest makes up the lion's share of the payment. And the natural thinking is to send extra principal payments to pay down the monster interest. But what happens when you do that is you're reducing the greatest tax write-off that you have. Now, what the lender does with these extra payments is they will use it to their benefit because they are on a 10% reserve. Now, real quick, a 10% reserve is what that means. Is all the money they take in, they lend it out, but they have to keep 10% reserve back to cover any money you have in a bank. So basically, the bank, if they would go belly up, you'd only get 10% of your money back. They have to hold 10% in reserve. Now, they will take that money and they'll lend it out. Now, here's the kicker. If you lose your job or you get sick or you need access to your equity for whatever reason, you're going to be required to qualify to get access to your own equity. Now, think about what the return is on the equity. Say you have $100,000 equity in the property. Well, what kind of return do you get at the end of the year? Does the bank send you a check? No, they don't. You don't get any rate of return. Nothing. Now, there's some great books out today that dismiss the old concepts that we talked about. We've got Ordinary People, Extraordinary Wealth by Rick Edelman, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, Missed Fortunes, Douglas Andrew, Money, Master of the Game, Tony Robbins, Retirement Savings Time Bomb, Ed Slott. Now, these financial experts advise us to handle our finances by how we live today, dismissing the old financial concepts. So I want to read just a few of those excerpts from these books. From Ordinary People, Extraordinary Wealth, Rick Edelman. Carrying a mortgage doesn't cause you to lose money at all. Just the opposite is true. Carrying a mortgage is actually quite profitable. It's eliminating the mortgage that forces you to give up profitable opportunities. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Today I find many people struggling simply because they cling to old ideas. They want things to be the way they were. They resist change. Old ideas are their biggest liability. It's a liability because they fail to realize that while the idea was an asset yesterday, yesterday is gone. Now, Douglas Andrew, Misfortune. The common misconception is equity in your home enhances your net worth, when in reality, equity in your home does not enhance your net worth at all. Separated from your home, however, it has the ability to dramatically enhance your net worth. Now, the Chicago Tribune had a great article that came out. It says, by having cash available for emergencies and investment opportunities, most homeowners are better off than if the equity is tied up in their residence. While employed and in excellent health, borrowing on a home is easy, but most people, especially retirees, unexpectedly need cash when they are sick, unemployed, or have insufficient income. And obtaining a home loan under these circumstances can be either impossible or very, very expensive. So let's look at the old concept that we were taught and the new concepts available today. The current value of a property is $250,000 on both sides. Client A put down a down payment of $150,000. He was taught to pay down and pay off the mortgage as soon as possible, and they also made extra principal payments along the way. Now, client B, he put down $25,000, and he was taught to pay as little into the house as possible and use an interest-only loan. Both houses now appreciate 5% the next year. That's $12,500 in appreciation. Client A has a return on their $150,000 down payment of 0. Client B has a return on their $25,000 of 0. Well, why is that? A mortgage doesn't affect your home's value at all. Home values rise and fall regardless of the size of your mortgage. Appreciation is determined by supply and demand. So, what does all this mean? To put as little money in your house creates the greatest amount of liquidity, safety, and rate of return. Let's talk about how to optimize the largest asset you have. Start using the dollars in your traditional mortgage payment to build and save for a financial future. This is where people lose a tremendous amount of their money, their cash flow. They need to harness the power of the mortgage. So start making your mortgage work for you instead of you working for it. And there are a couple of ways to accomplish this. One is a home equity line of credit, which I'm not going to get into much here. It's a little more complicated. Not that it's that complicated, but it takes a little more effort. And the other is an interest-only mortgage. I'm going to explain a quick overview of the interest-only option here as an example. And like I said, one of the tools we use for managing real estate is the interest-only mortgage. And I have become a big advocate of the interest-only mortgage. Although a lot of people don't understand them, so let me explain how this works. The interest-only mortgage allows you to pay the interest only every month on the borrowed funds. You pay only the interest due. You keep the principal portion instead of paying it to the lender, thereby creating excess cash flow that is yours to invest. Now, the trick here is to invest it, not to spend it on frivolous things, cars, boats, planes, and whatever else. You place the principal portion of your mortgage in a safe and acceptable place that provides a good rate of return, preferably a tax-favored environment, instead of the walls of your house. And this is where I would recommend the Index Universal Life contract. So let's look at the payment options on a 30-year and an interest-only mortgage on a $250,000 house. You can see the payment on a 15-year note is $1,726, and the interest-only note is $443. So that's a difference of $1,283 per month on your payment. That's a potential savings of $15,396 the first year alone. So if we look at that over a 5-year period, the difference between an interest-only and a 15-year mortgage, the cash flow savings is $15,396 times 5. That's a total cash flow savings of $76,000. So when we recapture the opportunity cost and put the money to work over a 5-year period in a 15-year mortgage with a rate of 3%, a total of $103,000, $70,000 in principal and $32,000 in interest. But if we use an interest-only loan, and put the difference in an IUL that has a hypothetical rate of return of 7% over that 5-year period, we would have acquired $92,000 of cash, paying the same monthly payment of $1,726. So what it comes down to is client A has $69,000 of principal earning 0 interest, and client B has $92,000 in cash earning 7% interest. So it would look like this. This is the 15-year amortization grid. You would have paid in $103,000 into the mortgage by year 5, with still $180,000 due on the note. And we are killing the greatest tax deduction we have by doing this. On the interest-only schedule, we can see that after 5 years, the mortgage is still $250,000. It's not going up. It's not going down. But our side fund has accumulated $92,000. So if we continue this strategy over the next 5 years for a total of 10, we have just about enough in the side fund to write a check to pay off the mortgage. So if you really want to pay your house off, get an interest-only loan, pay a 15-year payment, put the difference in the IUL or side fund with what we could call private reserve, pay the house off in 10. However, if you want to manage the asset properly, continue the strategy for over the next 5 years for a total of 15. Now we have $409,000 in the index side fund on a $250,000 note. So if we look at the interest-only loan schedule over a 15-year period, we can see the loan payment is $5,300 over the 5-year period. We would have acquired $92,000 in the side fund right here. But notice that that side fund is earning $5,700 in interest. So at that point in time, we could actually say the house is paid off because we are creating as much interest as we are paying. Now, if we fast forward this to the 11th year, we have, that's the second highlighted line here, we have $255,000 in the IUL fund. And the interest being created on the 255 is 3 times the interest that we're paying to employ the money. We're paying $5,300 and we're making $16,000. So by year 15, we have a side fund of $409,000, creating $27,000 in interest. That's 5 times the interest we are paying. So you can see this is a very different way to manage a house or a home mortgage, but it becomes very efficient. Now, which would be wiser? Client A having a mortgage payment of $1,726, trying to pay this thing off over a 15-year period, and actually sometimes sending in an extra principal payment. Having $69,000 over that 5-year period in the brick and the mortar of the house versus client B with a $250,000 interest-only mortgage paying $400 a month, who over a 5-year period has accumulated a side fund of $93,000 earning interest. Client A, call it $70,000 in principal in the property with no liquidity use or control, and client B has $93,000 in the side fund that you can have access to and has liquidity, use, and control, and is earning a rate of return. Now, some are not comfortable with an interest-only or variable rate mortgage, because at one time I thought this way too, because they say they don't know what the rate is going to be. But keep in mind that on any interest-only contract, there are always caps. Typically, if your note is for 2%, and the cost of the money goes up by contract, your interest will be capped at maybe 9%, or 10%. Now what that means is that as interest or the cost of a dollar goes up, so does the interest in the equities and your side fund. Interest does not work in a vacuum. They really run in parallel and they work hand in glove. But if you're not comfortable with that, you can do the same strategy using a 30-year mortgage, but keep in mind you will be putting principal payments in the brick and the mortar of the property, and you will be reducing one of the largest tax deductions you have. But if you feel more comfortable with the 30-year guaranteed fixed interest rate, it will work, but just not as efficient. You can make it more efficient if you use a home equity line of credit, but that's a whole nother discussion. Now let's talk about creating an effective arbitrage. Banks know how to do this very well. Writing off the interest paid, which is the interest-only mortgage that we're borrowing from, we can actually write off that interest every year, and compounding the interest earned on the principal in the side fund. We just talked about it. Now, here's the picture at the front of a bank. On the right side, they have a banner that says checking account paying 2.5%. And on the left banner, you can see that the home equity loan is 4.2%. So if someone drove up on the right side of the bank and deposited $100, then the bank would pay them $2.50 that year for their $100. Now, if you drove up on the left side of the bank and wanted a $100 loan, they would charge you $4.20. Basically, they pay out 2% on one side, collect 4% on the other. Now, I'm going to show you how to do the same thing and fall into that 7 percentile. So let's look at this in a positive, efficient arbitrage. I borrow money at 5%, average cost over a 15-year period. It will cost me $48,750. Now, if I compound the money in my side fund with the 7% growth rate over 15 years, my total would be $175,009, a difference of $127,153. Now, this is a positive arbitrage with a positive spread, and this is actually creating wealth. The difference between putting equity in a property versus separating equity and putting it in an accumulation account provides with some benefits. Now, if I'm putting the money in real estate, I am exposing my money to market risk. If the value of the property drops, I lose the equity. There's no liquidity, use, and control of any equity in the property. It has a zero rate of return. It is actually a preferred debt because I get to write off the mortgage interest. But if I'm putting the money in the accumulation account, it creates liquidity, safety, use, and control. It gives me a positive rate of return, and it creates a tax advantage. So separating the equity from the property is a common sense strategy that everyone should do. It's really a smart way of managing the asset, but it's not commonly done. And the preferred accumulation account to do that is the IUL, in my opinion, because it meets our criteria of safety, liquidity, predictability, use, control, and has a rate of return. Now, the second asset most Americans acquire is their retirement accounts that they are funding. These are not only the second largest assets you own, but they are also have some drawbacks. So I'm going to spend a little time explaining how this asset is misunderstood and how to use it to build wealth and secure a retirement. 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, SEPs. What do these things do? Well, our CPAs and our tax preparers will tell us that put money away in a qualified plan actually saves us taxes. But do they really save taxes? Let's look at what qualified plans really do. They do two things. They defer the tax, but they also defer the tax calculation. Now, these are two very important features that qualified plans do that you need to be aware of. They don't really save tax at all. All they do is postpone the tax, and not only do they postpone the tax, they postpone the calculation of the tax. So here's the question for you. What tax bracket will you be in the next 15 to 20 years? What deductions will you have in the next 15 to 20 years when you start distributions? Are you going to be in a higher or lower tax bracket? Are you going to have tax deductions or no tax deductions? In other words, will your house be starting to get paid off? Are the kids gone? So if you're deferring your tax and deferring your tax calculation, is it really a good idea to postpone the tax? Now, most Americans are pouring thousands of dollars in traditional IRAs, company-sponsored 401k plans. So let's look at the 4 phases of retirement. There's the contribution accumulation phase everybody loves because they're tax favored. But what people kick down the road, just like our government kicks down the road, is the withdrawal and transfer are taxed. And we don't look at what the repercussions of the withdrawal and transfers look like. We only look at the contribution and the accumulation advantage of qualified plans. So I ask again, is postponing the taxes really a good idea? Now, if you look at our national debt, it's in a bad situation. It's forecast to top $22 trillion, and we have to pay that debt. There are about $14 to $15 trillion in qualified money, 401ks and the like, that hasn't been taxed yet. It is being deferred until it takes distribution. Now, the baby boomer generation is the largest generation in history. They are all getting ready to start taking distributions from qualified plans. Now, how do you think the government is going to pay this $22 trillion debt? They're going to have to raise taxes. And when they do, one of the places they're going to raise taxes is on these qualified plans. So when you start taking distributions, you will be paying the U.S. government's debt. So we have to ask, just whose retirement are we really planning? Yours or Uncle Sam's when we use qualified plans? That's the question. So I'd have to also ask, knowing what what I'm showing you here now, would you rather be putting your money into a qualified plan, deferring the tax, or putting it into an index product that's never going to have to pay any tax? Remember the demonstration of the power of compounding. So when we look at the mainstream, remember the 93 percentile versus the 7 percentile. If they were doing what they should be doing, the 93% would be wealthy, but they're not. If you look at how the mainstream are putting their money away and how they're managing their money, they usually divide it into 3 separate buckets. 80% in tax-deferred accounts, 20% in taxable accounts like stocks, bonds, and things like that, and almost nothing in tax-free accounts. So having your savings allocated in this way can be problematic. First, when taxes go up, because most believe they will at some point, you don't know what your future tax liability is on government-regulated tax-deferred qualified plans. Well, that's a mouthful. Second, taxes on your gains are detrimental to growing money. Remember our illustration, our 20-period thing? So non-qualified accounts are taxable, and most of them have annual fees that most people don't even know about that you have to pay. Third, all tax-deferred accounts and all equity accounts are subject to market risk. They can go up, they can go down. A better solution is to allocate 15% to a tax-deferred account. Why is that important? Well, it's important because if you're paying mortgage interest, you get a tax deduction. So there's nothing wrong with putting money in a tax-deferred account, especially if your employer is going to match you dollar for dollar. You can't beat free money. So when you take it out, if you use that money to pay an interest-only mortgage, the distribution, that tax-deferred account, is tax-free because you can offset the tax on the distribution with the mortgage payment that you're paying the financial institution. So it's a watch. So it's really a good idea to have tax-deferred money for that application. Now, in your taxable bucket, you want to have a 5% allocation. If you're going to want to have a good credit score, so on your income tax return, you want to have some taxes being paid, so you can show creditors that you are creating an income stream And this allows you to have access to borrowed funds and credit scores. So 5% in a taxable account is very beneficial. But 80% of your money, though, if you want to have protection, liquidity, use, and control, should be in a place where you can control the money, keep it safe from market risk, and have tax-favored growth. And this is a smarter way to do that. So let's look at a couple cases. This is a 35-year-old male, husband and wife, with a couple kids. He works for an auto body painting company, painting cars, and he wanted to save for the future and protect his family. So we determined that he could afford $700 a month without affecting his family's lifestyle. So what we did on this 35-year-old was we created a $700 a month IUL product. It had a $250,000 death benefit to start, and you can see that all the way over on the right. The $700 a month actually allowed him to put $8,400 a year away, and we projected he would do that from age 35 to his 65th birthday. So if he were to do that, he would create a $252,000 of funding. That's what he would pay in. But what we wanted to show him and also show you is that his biggest concern was if a company were to let him go in 4 or 5 years. If they come in and said, hey, Joe, here's your pink slip, you're out of here. Well, if you look over from year 5, he's got $35,000 sitting in cash in the account that he can actually access and keep him going while he is able to replace his job. So having access to his money is beneficial. It was very important to him. But if it was in a qualified plan, would he have access to the money? Well, no, because he's only 40 years old. If he took it out, he'd have to pay penalties and taxes. So the liquidity, use, and control of the qualified plan wouldn't be there. The liquidity, use, and control is there in the IUL contract. So let's look at if he doesn't need this money over that 30-year period of growing. He's putting in $8,400, and when he turns on the income at age 66 is basically paying out $84,000 yearly. So 10 times the amount of money he's putting in is coming out. And the beautiful thing about this $83,000 is that it's all coming out tax-free. So let's say, let me take a sip here, that by his 80th birthday, he dies. He's taking out $83,000 and dies. His wife will be left with a $600,000 tax-free money coming out of the death benefit. So he went from $8,400 in contributions to $84,000 in distributions with a death benefit that blossomed in value to go to his heirs if something were to prematurely happen. So it's self-completing. The distributions equate to $2 million. He put in $252,000 and took out $2 million. So this worked out very well for this 35-year-old. And this put him in the financially independent 7th percentile we talked about. He has now got a tax-free distribution that will carry him into his life expectancy. Case study number 2. A 60-year-old. He has $250,000 in a qualified plan. What we decided to do with him was a strategic rollout. He wanted to get this out of the qualified plan, away from the government control, as far as taxation is concerned, because his cost of distributing the money out of the plan. He is in a 28% tax bracket, but his actual cost was costing him 20% to get the money out on his 1040. So what we did was we started taking $50,000 a year out of the qualified plan and put $10,000 to the paid $10,000 to the IRS and put $40,000 a year to the IUL policy. So on his 60th birthday, we put $40,000 and by his 64th birthday, we had taken the $250 out of the qualified plan paid $50,000 to the government, and $200,000 was in the account. He had a $500,000 death benefit, so if something were to happen to him, it would go to his wife, tax-free. Now, his plan was to leave it alone and let it grow. So by his 76th birthday, he was able to turn on the income, and the income available to him was $38,000 of tax-free income. So he put $40,000 a year in for 5 years, and he has basically taken $40,000 out for the rest of his life. So when you look at his life expectancy of 90 or 91, he will have taken out $38,000 for that whole period, and he has a death benefit of $250,000 that passes on to the children. Case number 3, a 50-year-old couple with $100,000 in savings that they had saved. Well, actually, they acquired it from an inheritance. You know, so it says modified endowment. I'll talk about that here in a sec. They said, listen, we're not going to do anything with this money, but we would like to have it for our children and grandchildren. What can we do with it? So we told them that if you put this into an IUL contract and you just dumped it in all at once, it won't be a tax-free distribution. The policy would mech. It would become a modified endowment contract. It would be like having a qualified plan. It will be tax deferred. The exception would be for if you had some medical issues like medical care, nursing home care, long-term care, that kind of thing. But because you're not going to use the money and you have no desire to use the money, let's just go ahead and do a single premium life policy with liquidity, use, and control of the cash. Now, notice there is a $380,000 death benefit. So if something were to happen to the 50-year-old male, the $100,000 would turn into $380,000 and pass to the wife and the children tax-free. But if nothing were to happen and he lived to 65, 66, he could actually turn on the income and take out $21,000 a year for the rest of his life. Or he could just leave the money, sit in the policy, and let it grow and go to his heirs. So this is just another example of how you can use this IUL product. Now, I've got another one here I'm working on. Let me bring it up here and show it to you. There you go. This is an 8-year-old who inherited $50,000 from his grandmother. Now, you can see here under the annual premium we put in for 4 years, we put $10,000 a year in. I'm still working on optimizing this. So he's funded it with $50,000 for 5 years. He's got a $900,000 death benefit, which I'm probably going to adjust downward just a little bit to improve the efficiency. But if you notice when we come down here, we'll come down to, and we'll take a look at him at 60 years old here. Come across. You can see he's worth $1.3 million in his account value. $1.3 million. So let's go to, we turned on the income here just to see what it would look like at age 65, turned on the income, and he'll be able to draw out $118,000 a year tax-free for the rest of his life. And you can see the illustration runs out here. If he would live to 120, he could draw that $118,000 out to 120 and still have a pretty significant death benefit. So you can see the power and the efficiency of the IUL contract. So when it comes to money, I believe 95% of our family issues can be solved if we can write a check. Now, I have shared a couple of the strategies showing you how to be able to write that check and have the resources to do it. You should start looking at your money in a different way, using new concepts like the Mortgage Master Move and the qualified plan strategy I shared here. Now, I realize some of you might be saying, well, you know, this sounds kind of foreign, it sounds kind of strange, it's different. Well, that's fine. It's normal to think that. But what you need to understand, it is an efficient way, a different way to manage your real estate and retirement income. If you really want to be in control of your money, you need to think about managing your money differently using these concepts. Even a lot of real estate investors now are starting to use these concepts to fund their rental properties or their flipping properties. There's a lot of things that you can do here. But you really need to manage your assets and create wealth and a retirement income stream that you can't outlive. And will get you into that 7% we talked about a few minutes ago. Safety, liquidity, predictability, use and control are principles we have to follow to create that financial independence. Now, the strategies presented here are not all inclusive, and everyone's situation is a little bit different. And I want to again remind those X-Geners and millennials out there to please talk to somebody that's 60 years old or better and ask them how fast 60 got here. And they're going to tell you the same thing. It's a blink of an eye. It was yesterday. I turned around. I don't know how I got here. That's what they're going to tell you. So it's important, given the fact that most companies aren't giving pensions anymore, that you fund your own retirement. Social Security is in question. What's going to happen with all that? We know it's going to be reduced. So please, please, talk to a 60-year-old and see what they think. But if anybody would like to explore the strategies in more detail that we talked about here, give me a call, send me an email. We'll set up an appointment to discuss how you can possibly move forward from here. But you need to understand, you need to have a picture of where you're at and what you're doing to be able to map out where you're going or where you want to go and what your goals to be. Without the things you want to achieve. The consultation is free, and I hope you've got something out of this information I presented here today. These are powerful strategies, as you can see, when put into play. It can't hurt to dig a bit deeper and find out. And remember, every journey starts with the first step, if you're willing to take it. I appreciate you taking the time to be on the call tonight, and thank you very much for joining.